Hello, everyone, and thank you for attending today's webinar. This presentation is being recorded and will run approximately 60 minutes, including question and answer time at the end, and will also be available on our Knowledge Hub. All attendees will receive their CEs approximately 1 week after the completion of this webinar. We will upload the credit using the email address that you have provided for your registration. Please ensure that the email address that you have provided matches the email on your EIC account. Before I turn things over, I would like to address a few logistical items. Attendees can listen to the webinar through their computers or by dialing in using the number and passcode provided by the Zoom software. If you have any questions, you do not need to wait until the end of the presentation to submit them. We encourage you to submit your questions using the question box screen on your screen. We will address any questions, as many questions as we can at the end of the presentation. And now I will turn things over to Amy Calvert, who serves as our CEO of Events Industry Council. Amy?
Thanks so much, Derek. And thank you to everyone for taking time to come together to learn and share insights and information about the current coronavirus. It's really important to think about, the fact that this webinar was really convened to address this particular situation, and we will be discussing important ways to take into consideration all of those factors. But we want to just emphasize that it's important, and there's always going to be a need to continue to demonstrate care and empathy and communicating very effectively in times of uncertainty, incorporating sound practices of health and well-being into our event design, supporting prosperity on a global scale, and making decisions that are based on facts, not fear. As the Events Industry Council and our commitment to providing resources to the global community, we will continue to provide you with accurate and timely and reliable resources and information so that you can make decisions that are based on those very things. I just wanted to share with you something that's been really inspiring to me through the past few weeks, and it's a quote by Dr. Tedros, who's the World Health Organization's General Director, that this is really a time for facts, not fear, and this is a time for science, not rumors, and this is a time for solidarity and not stigma. And that's one thing that I've always felt inspiring about this industry in and of itself, that really, truly together we're stronger, and that we're a community that reaches out through these times to take care of one another. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our panelists, and then I'm going to turn it over to our incoming chair of the Events Industry Council, Mark Cooper, who will be our moderator today. So as far as our panelists, first I'd like to introduce Kristen Mirabel, CMP. Kristen's the Director of Global Events for the Association of Certified Anti-Money Laundering Specialists. Kristen, a longtime friend of mine, is leading a global team developing strategic expansion and plans for conferences and events and resources to their membership and reaching new members across the globe. Prior to joining ACAMS, Mirabel was Vice President of Meetings for the Heart Rhythm Society and is also a past trustee for the PCMA Education Foundation and is a former member of the PCMA Board of Directors and Global Task Force. Next, we have Mr. David Dubois, CMP, CAE, SAE, CTA, President and CEO of IAEE. There's a lot of acronyms there, David. As the CEO of IAEE, David leads an association for the global exhibitions industry. Today, IAEE represents over 12,000 individuals in over 50 countries who conduct and support exhibitions around the globe. In addition to his expertise in the exhibitions field, he brings a wealth of knowledge from his background as the former CEO of major convention and visitors bureaus, leadership roles in hotels, and has had prominent industry leadership roles, including the former chair of the Events Industry Council Board of Directors, as well as a current board member for the Meetings Mean Business Coalition and the U.S. Travel Association. We also have with us today Elisa Peters, CMP CMM, Senior Global Account Manager for Experian, and she's also the chair of our CMP Governance Commission, which we're very grateful for. Elisa is also specializing in international and domestic meetings, contract analysis and negotiations, and meetings marketing. She's been recognized by Experian in 2017, 2018, and 2019 as their Trusted Advisor of the Year, and she also serves on the Board of Directors for MPI. Lastly, we have Aloysius Orlando, President of SACIOS and also President of APAC and the CEO of the Singapore Exhibition and Convention Exhibition Center. Aloysius is the Chief Executive Officer for SingX Holdings, whose portfolio includes venue management of the Singapore Expo Convention and Exhibition Center, the largest purpose-built MICE venue in Singapore, as well as event management arm, which develops and manages expositions, conferences, and other business events relating to key industries. And he has a background in leadership roles in Singapore's public sector. Aloysius is now the president of SACIOS and the president of the International Association of Convention Centers and the first Asian to assume the association's presidency. Aloysius might be a bit delayed in joining us, but I just again wanted to thank this panel for coming together really at a very short period of time to be a part of this important conversation and to provide leadership at this really important time for our industry. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to, as I said, our incoming chair of the Events Industry Council and CEO of IAC, Mr. Mark Cooper.
Thank you very much, Amy, and welcome Aloysius, who I could see has joined the group in a very timely moment. So it's great that you could be with us at the beginning of this. I'm now going to turn my video over so that I can refer to our scripts and attempt to be the glue that knits together the great minds and insights from the panel that we've got today. So, Amy, thank you again. Thank you as well to nearly 600 of you that have joined us today. In my mind, today's attendance demonstrates the strong commitment from you as meeting and event professionals from around the globe for making responsible and informed decisions today to manage the risks and the unknowns that we're faced with. Now, our panel are going to be sharing their thoughts and experiences in regards to the recent outbreak of coronavirus, as Amy highlighted, as well as though generally on managing risk and communication during other times of uncertainty. Undoubtedly, we have that opportunity to take today's situation that is unfolding and to be able to learn and be better prepared in the future. So we will be referring to that in general and from, of course, past situations as well, which we have already learned from. Now, before we begin our discussions and our deliberations, we should also note that this is a developing situation, and we recommend that event professionals and as an industry, we need to stay up to date using not only the resources on the Event Industry Council's website that has been shared with all, but also as well as consulting our own health and communications advisors, our legal advisors, and just seeking recommendations that are going to be specific for your organization or in particular your event and the destination that it takes place in. Now, the facts that we know so far are that the World Health Organization has declared coronavirus as a public health emergency of international concern. But at the same time, it has not recommended travel restrictions at this time beyond those in and out of China. Now, there are different positions that different countries and governments have taken, and there isn't a unified approach. So it is worth making that point. So I'd like to begin straight away by starting to engage with our panel. I'd like to start with Aloysius. Can you first tell us, Aloysius, about SARCIO's recent industry education program that you've already delivered related to the coronavirus preparedness? And Aloysius, I'll just ask you to take yourself off mute.
Can you hear me clearly?
Perfect. Welcome.
Okay. So thank you, Mark. And hello to my fellow panelists and to the webinar participants. It's a pleasure to join you on this truly evolving situation. SARCIOS is the National Industry Association for the Business Events or Meetings Industry in Singapore. And what we do is, of course, to ensure that in this situation, our members are kept up to speed on the measures that needs to be taken for participants of events held in Singapore, so that business can continue as far as possible and as business as usual. What has happened thus far is just a few hours ago, Singapore's Ministry of Health has declared an orange alert. What it means is that measures have to be stepped up in order to ensure thermal scanning, temperature taking are all in place. Large-scale events as well as large groups of activities are being encouraged to be postponed, or if they need to continue, measures must be in place. This just goes to demonstrate how fast the situation has evolved. What has happened also is that since last week, when we had the session with the industry members in Singapore, together with the relevant government authorities, we were operating in a alert level of of yellow, one step below. And since then and until now, before the alert level changed to orange, we were preparing for the measures such as ensuring there are sufficient stocks of surgical masks, thermal or thermometers, as well as hand sanitizers. And why these three items, particularly for hand sanitizers and stepping up of cleaning arrangements, is because the virus, as advised by WHO and the Ministry of Health in Singapore, state that transmission is really based on contact, not necessarily in inhaling, but how we touch, whatever we touch, the germs will stay on the surface for a certain time. So therefore, it's important to make sure you have your personal hygiene kept at the highest level possible. And that's why we had, for the past week or so, we have mounted personal hygiene measures such as hand sanitizers and the like. And because the level has now gone up, we have also sent out notes as well as advisories and measures to be taken to all our members. As a result of the last week's session, we have also put in place a nationwide communications network via the WhatsApp group, so that all key representatives of all key members of the industry can be kept up to speed on the developments, and more importantly, on the recommended measures that they need to put in place. So I'll stop here for now and I'll pass on over to Mark.
Aloysius, thank you. Congratulations as well to you and to all of those involved. The leadership you put in place over the last week, and definitely I can see that that will be helping you deal with new information as it comes through and being proactive in regards to managing the events that you have. And we hear so many examples in the last few days of organizations that are putting in place measures that will reduce the risk while still participating in the meetings that they take. As an example, IBM's global response to this through their meetings and events, and there's over 100 of them taking place, is that they are putting in place self-screening questionnaires for attendees. They are also working with their corporate health and safety departments to put in place medical plans, so how they deal with a situation as it arises. And as you touched upon, just the general risk reduction exercises that venues can take, such as antibacterial hand wipes, the use of hand sanitizing gels. These safeguards are which will undoubtedly help in these situations. But thank you for sharing those with us. I'd now like to turn, if I may, to Alicia. Now, Alicia, from your event management perspective, and we appreciate that you deal with, with a high number of events around the world, but how are you seeing your events responding to coronavirus at this time? And both, what are some of the short-term and the long-term considerations that both Experian, but also your clients are taking into consideration?
Well, I think it's key. This is, again, a wake-up call that we as an industry, all planners need to have an emergency action plan in place that is going to make allowances. To give you an idea, while coronavirus is horrible, the flu last year killed over 34,000 people. So having good practices in place, because we're bringing millions of people together to do business, that's always a fundamental and foundational recommendation that we have for all of our planners, that they have a plan in place that really protects the health and safety of their attendees on an ongoing basis. Furthermore, I think that it really is very key, not only for planners to be thinking in terms of live conferences that are happening now, but also some of the lack of tourism and lack of compression that's happening in certain markets and its impact on their potential attendance. Working with their venues and their planners and their partners to manage and mitigate any risk because of attendees that are going to be unable to travel or unable to clear customs. So we're kind of dealing with a twofold set of concerns. One set of concerns is, what do I do right now to make sure my attendees stay safe? And the second set of concerns is, how do I manage and mitigate risk in the event that I'm underperforming? And I really think the hotel partners and the venue partners around the world have been great at working together to really collaborate to work through a lot of issues that our clients are having right now with people having travel restrictions.
Alicia, if I can take the opportunity to ask you, just in regards to some of the decisions that your clients are making now, I think it's probably fair to say that continuation is one of those, and certainly for certain events in certain parts of the world, it's not a question of whether the event continues, it's just a question of doing your due diligence, being prepared, as you say, and putting in place measures to manage a situation as it arises. The second is postponement, and we hear that word a little bit, and I think you touched upon it, and we probably will a little bit as we talk with David. This recognizing that we have long-standing global partnerships with both the region and also the suppliers, as well as the organizations running meetings in those areas. So postponement is one way of keeping your commitment to the regions, to your members, to your
Correct.
staff in those areas. And the third is cancellation, when there is no other choice and the right decision is that the event should be cancelled. And then there is that question of what the impact is in relation to insurance that is put in place, the understanding and partnership that the venue takes in regards to that situation. Out of any of those three, do you have any examples that you have been dealing with in the last week that you think is probably a good example of best practice out there?
I do. I have a client who had a major stakeholder who was actually running a meeting, but was actually coming into the United States, or was supposed to be coming into the United States from China to hold their meeting. And essentially what this client did, obviously the most major stakeholder of the meeting couldn't attend and he was pretty key to the meeting continuing. So what we were able to do was work with a hotel to replace the business with a different meeting. And then essentially we're postponing that meeting and going to be holding it at a later time frame when that individual is able to travel back into the United States. So I do think we need to keep perspective that the flu season in the United States right now is a much more dangerous threat for my US planners than the coronavirus is. Already this year, we've had over 1 million people visit a doctor. We've had over 18,000 people hospitalized and over 10,000 people that have died of the flu in the US. And that's according to the CDC website today. So I think keeping that perspective and understanding if you're holding a meeting in the US and you're trying to decide whether or not to cancel or postpone that meeting, I definitely would implore that you maintain perspective as to the much bigger picture of what we as a country are dealing with on a day in and day out basis as it pertains to things that we're encountering every single year. When it comes to meetings that are happening in Asia, if there are actual travel restrictions that are making it close to impossible for people to actually get into the location or destination that you're supposed to be having your meeting, that's a whole nother story. And I think as an industry, we're really good at trying to maintain events or postpone events whenever possible in order to support the destination that we're going to. So I think just really looking at long term, is this going to be something we're talking about? We've already got vaccines that are in and some antiviral medicines that are being tested right now. So I would say, you know, if you have a meeting further out than a month, really it's going to be down to your legal counsel and your major stakeholders in making the decision about whether you should cancel your meeting or not. But I think keeping perspective in mind is going to be really important.
And with the quarantine and the period of 14 days, certainly I've heard firsthand in the last 24 hours that there is the hope that within 10 days now, because of all the measures that are being put in place, that we will see this peak and start to come down in terms of the spread. Now, of course, none of us know that is going to be the case, but it's worth noting that in 10 days' time, there should be some clearer signs in terms of the results of the measures that countries and and organisations have put in place. I'll give one further very quick example, Alicia, which relates to IAC's conference, which is due to take place in Brisbane in 2 weeks' time. We have just routed some of our attendees, rerouted them instead of going through Hong Kong, through the Middle East. So they are still committed to attending the meeting. The meeting is still taking place. We're just mitigating some of the obvious risks there. So there are ways to be proactive now. It's not just a case of do we run it or don't we run it. But
absolutely.
Some great advice there from Alicia. Kristen, if I may call out one event that you are running specifically, because I know that in April this year you have your Asia Pacific conference that's taking place in Hong Kong. So perhaps you can tell us a little bit about what you're going through and the plans that you have already put in place, knowing that that event is some sort of 12, maybe less than 8 weeks time.
Right. So we are true. We are meeting at the end of April in Hong Kong. What we have done right now is enacted our emergency communication plan. Soon there will be messaging up on our website, and our action right now is we are not canceling, nor are we postponing, but we are working with our local partners in Hong Kong. We do have an office in Hong Kong as well, and making sure that our representatives keep us informed and as to how it's progressing. If you are reading and understanding what is happening in Hong Kong in particular, essentially everything is closed through the month of February. So we are waiting and seeing how the disease, how it progresses, keeping a close eye on the WHO and any action that they take and we're going to be making our decision at the end of the month. In the meantime, we are speaking to our attendees, taking a proactive stance and making sure that they're aware that, you know, we're staying abreast of the situation, that we are giving them, you know, a timeline and stating that a decision will be made as to whether or not we move forward with the event at the end of February. Obviously, there's a lot of concern on the part of our attendees, as well as the various stakeholders like our exhibitors and our sponsors. Some have already indicated that their companies are imposing travel restrictions on their own travel. So, you know, despite our decision, it may be that they won't be able to travel to the event, and certainly that's going to be a consideration as well. But our stance is to be very proactive, over communicate, because this is forefront on the minds of our attendees, especially in region, you know, and, you know, looking as an organization as a whole as to how this will impact us as well as our partners in the region. I think, was it Elisa or maybe Mark, you mentioned earlier, you know, the impact of us canceling, we don't take that lightly. And we want to make sure that we're acting responsibly. We're being very caring and empathetic of our members and the individuals that will be impacted by this. And we want to ultimately make sure that everyone is safe and that we're providing a safe environment as we're convening a large group of individuals. So, you know, again, our stance has been being overly communicating and making sure that it's understood where we're sit and providing a timeline. I think that's what everyone's looking at. And just looking at some of the questions that are coming across this webinar, I think that's several people have asked, you know, what is a reasonable timeline? I think that really depends on your organization, the type of event that you're running, the lead time that is needed for participants and maybe your exhibitors. So, you know, it would be about knowing your event and working with your partners to make that assessment. But in our terms is that we're going to be, for a meeting that is at the last week of April, we're making the decision at the end of February as to whether or not to move forward. So we're giving an 8-week time frame. If you look online, you know, particularly on Hong Kong, there's most events, in fact, I think all events have been either canceled or postponed through the month of February. And now I'm seeing that there's a good number of events that are being postponed and canceled in March as well. But again, we're working with, you know, the individuals in Hong Kong to, you know, to keep us informed, and also our venue and understanding what measures they're taking to combat this and be ready for us should we decide to come in April.
Kristin, the approach that you're taking is admirable, and what I'm hearing loud and clear is that whilst you have the best interests of your attendees at heart from a health and well-being perspective, you are maintaining control of your event and recognise that you are the proponent of sharing lots of information and being seen to be the ones that are watching hourly and daily and making decisions that are in the best interest of your attendees. Whilst you do that whilst at the same time, if you're doing that and providing as much of that relevant information as possible so that your attendees can make an informed decision, there are also their organizations that will either benefit from the information that your attendees pass on to them to help them make the right decision, or they may take a different corporate approach themselves.
Right, right. And there is a lot of misinformation out there, and I think it's very important that as an organization, we're controlling the messaging, and that we want to make sure that, you know, that our constituents in region and around the world understand the position that we're taking, and that we're being very mindful of all of the conditions, and that we're not acting quickly and based on, you know, we want to make sure that we're acting based on facts and with really truly the well-being of our attendees in mind. So I think that there was some initial responses and there was a lot of news out there. We're not relying on media reports. as to the progress. We're relying to, as you know, individuals that are actually on the ground in region to help us make that decision.
Very good point. Thank you for reinforcing that. David, if I could come on to you now, recognizing first and foremost the importance of health and safety. We've been talking about that for the last 30 minutes. We're also expecting there's going to be a long-term impact on the regional economies that are affected by the travel restrictions and these sort of decisions that are taking place. Are you able to share with the group today, you know, some of your thoughts on the long-term recovery for the regions that are currently being affected, and maybe based upon what you've seen in previous incidents globally over the last 10 to 15 years?
Yes, thank you, Mark, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody on the call. The global MICE industry, meetings, incentives, conventions, and exhibitions, through the good work at EIC and all of our contributing organizations, is worth over 1.2 trillion US dollars. 300 billion of that is in the exhibition industry, which is certainly the focus and area that myself, my staff, and our members continue to focus on and work in. Mark, the to put this in perspective, as of yesterday, about 30,000 cases were identified and reported worldwide, coronavirus, in about 15 to 18 countries. And of course, we've just heard the good work that Aloysius and his government partners and industry partners are doing to elevate the level in Singapore, because it's going to spread and continue to spread. And once again, continue to focus on not being too fearful. And also put in perspective that compared to SARS, by the way, SARS lasted until it settled down and was contained about 4 months. We're not even a month, we're about a month into this now. And what is encouraging is, as Mark said, fingers crossed and legs crossed and toes crossed, that in the next 10 days, it really becomes more under control by the good work that's being done by China and every country in Asia and all over the world. But the good news is that, Mark, only about 2% about 2% is representative of the deaths due to this virus, where with SARS it was about 8%. So there's a lot of good thoughts to hold on to. Relative to the United States, last year in 2019, approximately 3 million Chinese visitors came to the United States. And it is estimated through Oxford Economics that we'll see just in the United States about a 28% decline of Chinese travelers, or about a negative $10 billion impact in the next 15 months. Once again, we are truly hopeful that's too pessimistic. And the only other data that I've been able to read, and I know there's a lot more out there, is our good friends in the country of Italy are projecting about a 5 billion, with a B, negative impact. But I'm here to tell you that we have to keep the faith. We have to continue through EIC and through all the different organizations. I believe there's at least 15 or 20 countries represented on this call today. Please make sure that you're doing the kind of good work that you've heard from Aloysius and from EIC and all your different organizations, and make sure that we continue to stay positive about this. And I'll finish with this, that to answer your question, Mark, the long-term recovery could be several months. The cancellation, as Elisa spoke to, is going to happen. I know that, having lived through SARS, actually as a Convention and Visitors Bureau executive and hotelier back then, the partners, the supplier vendor partners of all of our show organizers and our meeting and business event professionals are going to step up. We need to be flexible. If somebody has to cancel, don't try to jam people with cancellation fees. That's ridiculous. We need to take the lead like the airlines are doing, and being flexible and rebooking flights So we really, really have to hold hands as a global $1.2 trillion mice industry to make sure that all of us get through this with the least amount of negative effect. So Mark, that's my thought at this time, if you want to ask a follow-up question.
David, thank you. I mean, all I can do is take inspiration from the fact that already we're starting to think about what happens when we break the back of the uncertainty and get into a mode of recovering and supporting the industry and our partners globally. I, for one, will never forget the year that I attended MPI's WEC in New Orleans 12 months after Hurricane Katrina had decimated the area. And just the commitment that our industry made and the impact that our industry can have on helping our partners. And in Asia particularly, you know, the impact is huge, but you pulled out some very significant numbers, and I've been hearing similar stories in Sweden, in the United Kingdom, to that which you've seen in the US and in Italy, where it is affecting immediately tourism numbers. Now, from a meetings perspective, of course, that presents other opportunities. So for those that you know are struggling with attrition or securing housing, etc., for their meetings, there may be, you know, every cloud has a silver lining. There may be opportunity there as well. But it is.
And Mark, if I may just add one last thing.
Yes.
To really jump on what you just said, we will have sunshine. We will get a green light from the World Health Organization. All of our very concerned and working really hard friends and colleagues in China and across Asia and across the world. When that happens, we should all right now be preparing aggressive promotion plans to tell the world, let's get out and travel. Let's attend business events. Let's go to these exhibitions. Let's make sure that we continue the great work that our economic impact and cultural impact gets from our industry. So think about right now and start writing out your promotion plan, because when the green light goes on and the sunshine is out, let's get at it.
Great. David, thank you for that perspective. If I can, I'm going to come back to you, Aloysius, and I know today the situation in Singapore specifically is changing by the hour, and you are, you know, you came off calls with government officials to join our call today, so this may be an unfair question to ask you, but I'm interested for you as a major Asia representative of venues that are operating. What are the practices that you're seeing being used by hotels and venues today in your area to reduce the transmission of the illnesses? And do you foresee there to be additional measures that are going to be taken now as a result of moving from yellow to amber in Singapore?
Thanks, Mark. I think the measures that we have put in place during the yellow level still remains, which is to ensure that notices go out to at hotel lobbies, at venues, about the maintenance of personal hygiene, the hand sanitizers, antibacterial cleaning arrangements are being put in place. We also advise folks who are not feeling well to stay home or to stay back wherever they are. I think this is the baseline of measures. When we talk about step-up measures, this is to add another layer of precautionary measures. This will come in the form of checking for high fever, and that's where the thermal scanners come into play. Already we see that being practiced at the entry points at the airports, and that's the first line of defense. In fact, for any country, the first line of defense is at the airports or points of entry and exit, where you can then gauge whether someone has a high fever, and then you need to put in place measures to quarantine them for, in this case, 14 days, so that you're able to, or hopefully they get better. If not, at least they can then move on to getting the necessary help or hospital care, or care from clinics and hospitals. So that's the series of step-up measures. I think what will be of most concern is for organizers to think about, should I cancel, should I postpone? Because the advisories that come along with amber or orange level is to encourage people to avoid large-scale events, or if they have to attend, to then ensure that they have the precautionary measures put in place, both from the venues that the events are being staged, as well as the event organizers. Certainly, therefore, when we talk about postponement and cancellation, this is from the industry side in Singapore. What we encourage folks to do is to really work out an amicable solution. And I think some members of the panel have spoken. It's not about trying to go out for the kill. I think that's not the intent. The intent has always been and will always be the safety and well-being of participants to the event, and that includes the workforce of the industry.
Yes.
And to do so, we want to make sure that if we can postpone, let's postpone that. Akin to what we see in terms of cancellations or postponements by airlines and hotels.
Yes.
Unfortunately for organizers or for event organizers, there will be a lot of knock-on effects if you were to postpone and cancel. The audiovisual suppliers, the transport companies, the logistics firms, the freight forwarding, especially for exhibitions, all will need to sort of sing the same tune in terms of how best can they support during a postponement. There will also be cash flow issues, particularly for small and medium enterprises along the value chain of the MICE industry. So the partners will also have to bear in mind how can we help each other. Indeed, for venues, it's really to look at, certainly if we can postpone it, we'll postpone it. Then you will have an issue which one needs to bear in mind. If the postponement takes 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 months, you will see a bunching up of events in the second half of the year. Then we run into another set of issues, which is inventory. Do we have enough inventory to host all these rescheduled and postponed events? So those are things that will have to be borne in mind, especially between organizers and venues, to make sure that you have the discussions, have an open and clear and frank discussion as to how best to manage the situation. And I noticed in some of the questions that are coming online, a typical question would be, how long should we be postponing the event to? That's a very difficult question to answer, but I think what's important is to get a sense, and some of the panelists have spoken, the sense from the participants. How are they viewing such events? Some might be facing travel advisories from their companies. So perhaps they are going to earn a set of caution and give them 3 to 4 or 5 months. There could be insurance considerations and the like. So I think these are things that needs to be gathered before one can decide what would be a reasonable amount of time to postpone to.
Aloysius, thank you. And that's a very, very interesting point when you consider that postponement will have an impact on availability later in the year, and one which I've heard for the first time from you now, but it's obvious, you're right. And linked to my next question for Alicia as well, what's starting to become clear is, what do we do now? With that question in the Q&A, when do we make a decision on postponement? I think the only reasonable advice that I think I can give, having listened to you all today, is that if you can delay your decision on postponement to 10 days time or out, in the next 10 days, we are going to have a much clearer picture of the path that it's taking and how quickly everything that's being put in place is reducing the risk and stopping the spread of contamination. So making decisions now, this is the riskiest time for you to do it. But if you can wait and you can make those decisions in 10 days, 2 weeks time, you're going to be able to make a much more informed decision. Alicia, is that anywhere near the sort of advice that you're giving to your clients at this time, or are you giving very different advice?
No, I would absolutely agree with that. I think we're going to know a lot more about the potential spread, especially to different regions, particularly in the US, but regions throughout. I just spent 7 days in Bangkok and transited through Hong Kong. And I think one of the key things that we have to keep in mind is where attendees are coming from, as well as where we're holding the meeting. So I think in 10 days' time, having an understanding of what the destination is going to look like, or the issue, how the issue is going to impact that destination, is a key piece of information. If you have the luxury of being able to wait, I absolutely agree that I would. And I would say that a majority of my clients are taking a wait and see approach and are giving it another week or two before they start making decisions about meetings that are actually going to be happening in Asia Pac. In regards to, I have had some planners that have come and said, hey, we have attendees freaking out about even coming to our meeting that's being held in Nashville, for example. And
Right.
and this, I think, is one of the key things, and why I keep going back to perspective. I think communicating the fact that we have very few cases here in the United States, and that none of them have resulted in a death, and just reminding people of the facts. While you as an organization have to make the decision about what's best for your organization, but ultimately I think we can't be held hostage by fear-based decision-making, because it tends to never work out to anybody's advantage in the long term. So.
Right. Alicia, thank you for that. Kristen, you've been listening to a lot of points that are being made, and as a fellow event professional, is there any other, I guess, advice that you give event professionals in responding to the situation and the requests that they're getting? Or it would be great
Sure.
if you have more.
Well, I think Elisa mentions an important point about, us not overreacting, but I think it's a matter of reacting and being proactive, not just in our communication, but how we're dealing with the situation on site at our programs. I'm actually in Washington, D.C. right now for a conference, and we've stepped up our measures. We have hand sanitizer throughout. We might not have normally done that at our event here in D.C., but we're very mindful that, it is flu season after all, but also it is something that, it's making sure, again, that we are taking care of our attendees. This kind of brings it home that maybe we need to be much more diligent no matter where our event is worldwide. We do bring together a large group of individuals. So maybe that is not such a bad practice to have, the hand sanitizer, making sure that, the food preparation, and making sure that our partners, our venue partners, what are they prepared to do, in the cleaning of the rooms and the common spaces, being extra diligent during these times, again, no matter where your events are being held. Going back to communication, and what I mentioned earlier is one of the things that we're doing, because between now and April, we have 17 events going on worldwide. We are going and looking at those attendance lists and where people are coming from, proactively reaching out to individuals and asking them, are they going to have, are they concerned, or is there company concerns? Are they going to have challenges attending an event? We have a considerable number of participants from China that attend our events. We do have an event in Mumbai, India next week. We are proceeding with that event, but also very mindful again of how, how this will impact the travel of the attendees. Majority of the individuals attending that particular event are coming from within India, but they've also asked us because they have concerns, and they were asking us if we had any attendees coming from China, and because that would make them, maybe consider or reconsider whether or not they would be able to attend. So it's a very interesting dynamic, and I think it's a knowing who your attendees are, how you're communicating, and being very proactive. As to the point that you made, Mark, about cancellation and delay, I do think while taking a 10-day approach and let's see how it goes, there's some of us who do have events that are occurring within that 10-day period. Working with the local officials are so important, and understanding what the restrictions are on locally. We had a training event that was going to occur in Hong Kong next week, we have canceled that one-day training event. And it's, you know, it was at the advisement of the individuals within, you know, in our venue, also our local participants, and that they're not having, you know, they pretty much are in lockdown in Hong Kong at the moment. So I think, you know, there's a lot of factors that go into this and we can't ignore it. I think we just need to be much more diligent and looking at who our attendees are, where they're coming from, and not just focus on our APAC. And Elisa, you mentioned this. This is a global event. This is not just APAC. It is impacting events worldwide, and we need to be aware of what the impact is for our organizations and the venues and the participants worldwide.
Wise words indeed. Thank you, Kristen. And in the spirit of time, I want us to be able to move into the Q&A. There's a number of questions that we've got here. David, I think if you agree, we did cover with you, you know, the importance of the recovery, you know, for regions and the part that we play. And during the Q&A, if you have the opportunity, do share other lessons that you think have been learned. But if I may, just for now, I'd like to hand back over to Derek and Christine to pull out some of those questions, and I'm sure we have the ability to go over the hour with questions if people can hold on and are interested to do that.
Sure, Mark, I can begin with the Q&A and just throw it out there. So first question that we have, do you think this will affect planners and events that are going to be held in Latin America?
Kristen, I just asked you to
yeah, sorry, I was shaking my head. You know, it goes back to my original. I think that this is a worldwide event, and you need to be aware of, you know, who your attendees are that might be attending events in Latin America, and you know, be aware. Probably, you know, reach out to individuals who you think may be coming from affected areas, but also be mindful there may be concerns of individuals that aren't currently affected, but are concerned about individuals who may be coming from affected areas. So, and then working with your venue and being diligent, just like what we did here in DC. I think it's, you know, we really want to be mindful that, you know, people are remaining safe and that we're providing them with not only information, but the tools that they need in order to remain healthy. And so I do think that it would impact events no matter where they are in the world.
Thank you. Derek.
All righty. So for larger meetings taking place soon, how much do we communicate with our attendees? What is the balance between too much, creating fear, versus being very informative of our plans to alleviate any fears?
Alicia or Kristen, do you?
Yeah, I think communicating with your attendees is always a great idea. And having something, if you have a central repository on your registration website or your association or event-based website that has it gives the attendee the ability to log on at any time to be able to get updates. That will allow you to organically change and update the information that you're providing as things change, because obviously this is a rapidly changing situation. So I think, I never think that too much communication is a bad thing, but I think allowing attendees to know where to go to get the most up-to-date information is really key. And then also making sure you're staying dialed in to your all your social media avenues, because you're going to have chatter that's going to be happening down those pathways that you definitely want to make sure that you're contributing to that conversation with fact-based information. So I think definitely tapping your organization's resource for communications is going to be a great idea if you have the ability. And if you don't, just really staying dialed in and creating a safe space for your attendees to go to for the latest and greatest info is definitely going to be key.
Mark, can I add in?
Please do.
Yeah, just to add on, the greatest fear, as we have found out, is really the fear of the unknown, and that's the case for this situation. Unlike, say, the common flu, that you can take medication and the like, but here they're trying to figure out how best to even address the symptoms and also the root cause. So bearing in mind that the greatest fear is the fear of the unknown, communications is very important. And I think there's no such thing as over communication, but what's important is to make sure, as what the panelist has mentioned, being fact-based. And I think we want to make sure that the lines of communication, whether it's social media, email, website, have the machinery in place. It could be just one person, but at least to have it timed periodically so that people can look out for information or changes. I think that will help allay any concern and, more importantly, work towards a reasonable decision making.
Aloysius, thank you. Appreciate that. If I may, I'm going to ask one of the questions to David because it relates to your industry specifically, David. If we are postponing a large-scale exhibition, what's the ideal timeline to inform participants and exhibitors? And I guess by that as well, it means how late can we leave it if we are cancelling a exhibition to make that decision ahead of the event starting?
Well, for large-scale exhibitions, any exhibition of any size, it's suffice to say that the more lead time you can give, the better. Obviously, it depends where your participants are coming from. If he or she is coming from China or Asia and there's still a travel ban, I think the airlines are going to be pretty flexible. Hoteliers are going to be flexible to a point, obviously. And one of the biggest challenges, Mark, is going to be if somebody does have to cancel or postpone, how do you take a big show or a business event and try to find availability over the next 6 months? You may, as a show organizer, as a business events meeting professional, you may have to become more flexible and go to other cities where you can find space. So the dynamics and the spin of this thing will last for a long time. But suffice to say, Mark, it's the more lead time you can give, the better, so that people can cancel their reservations, hopefully without fees, and their hotel reservations without fees. But the sooner, the better.
Thank you. Good advice. Ladies and gentlemen, we come up to the hour now. I know there are a number of other questions there, and I'll commit on behalf of my friends at EIC to us addressing those and putting them onto the website with all the other information that there is. But if I'm to summarize today's session, it is use information and knowledge to make informed decisions. Avoid and be very wary of sensationalism out there, because people are turning to us as event industry professionals to be the guiding light. Let us be super focused on the details over the next 10 to 14 days and make the right decision that is always going to be in the best interest from a health and well-being perspective of your delegates first. And then also don't forget the relationships and the pain that your industry partners are going through as well. David, Kristen, Alicia, Aloysius, thank you very much for being a part of of today's session. Thank you for sharing your views and thoughts with us. And particularly to Aloysius, who is in the heart of this at the moment, we send all of our best wishes to you as well over the coming days. Do keep informed through the Event Industry Council's website. Christine, Mariella, Amy, Derek, thank you for arranging today's session, and from myself, it's over and out, and have a good weekend, everybody.
And thank you to our moderator and panelists. And as a reminder, we will be sending your CE approximately 1 week from today. And you will also be able to access this recording on the EIC Knowledge Hub. Have a great day, everyone.